Wow. Wow, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored. I'm so deeply honored. We're going to start with the video. If we can get that up instead of the slides. So we'll bring it up and we're going to get pumped up with what we think is going on.
Emanating from Wuhan, China is sweeping across the globe.
Something is off.
The disease caused by the novel coronavirus has been titled COVID-19.
What we're being told doesn't add up.
In this crisis that people count for there's no cure, no way to treat this illness. All we can do is wait for a vaccine.
All we can do is wait for a vaccine.
There must be a doctor out there who's questioning this.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm the Vice Chairman of Internal Medicine. The only chance to reduce the risks of hospitalization is early home treatment. We can beat this pandemic.
Patients actually think the virus is untreatable. There's such a focus on the vaccine. Where's the focus on people sick right now? The pressure to suppress any hope of treatment is extraordinary.
Why the single-minded focus on the vaccine? What is that? What is that about?
That's really going to be the goal of investigative reporters to figure this out.
Unprecedented lockdowns, devastating economic damage, huge violations of personal freedom, families separated from their loved ones, all in the name of a medical emergency.
Things won't go back to truly normal until we have a vaccine that we've gotten out to the entire world.
The hope we have of protecting our communities is to get a needle in every arm.
I am not going to follow what you are suggesting and let the virus slaughter my patients. John, I'm watching what's happening. This is a treatable illness.
I don't think this is a matter of academic debate and confusion. What the evidence shows is that this is an organized criminal enterprise. They call this a business opportunity.
People need to know the truth.
We are witnessing the greatest organized crime in history, to the tune of trillions of dollars.
The biopharmaceutical complex is using censorship, propaganda, and manipulation to keep people living in fear. But what we need now is courage.
Wow, that's it. That's it. What we need now is courage. That our book, Courage to Face COVID-19, was censored for 2 weeks on Amazon in September for a bogus allegation that it had offensive content. It doesn't even have a single expletive. Nothing in it made offensive content. It had 18 months of 5-star best-selling status. Why would Amazon censor it? We appealed 3 times. Amazon said, we can't tell you the part of the book that's offensive. They got massive pressure from the public and social media, and they put it back up on Amazon. Why? Amazon never takes down books. They've only banned a handful of books, including Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. Why would Courage to Face COVID-19 be banned, taken down from the platform? The answer is there is a biopharmaceutical complex. There is a vastly powerful syndicate that will stop at nothing to achieve its goal and will crush anything in its way, including this book and almost certainly the movie that's going to follow. You get a sense there will be a major motion picture. The actors will be much better than myself and John Leake. We did the best we could to get the message across. But John Leake is a best-selling true crime author from Dallas, Texas, who has his books have become movies. We believe this one, of which so many of you were involved in this story that evolved from early 2020 on. You played a role as well, and you'll see other characters in the book. But what John believes is that this is such a mind-blowing reality that it has to be told in an understandable story with a beginning, a middle, and an end with characters It can't just be a documentary. There's been a dozen or more documentaries that try to wake people up, and people aren't getting woken up. They're not. These documentaries keep rolling out, and everybody just keeps rolling on. The real illness that exists in the world right now appears to be in the human mind. In the human mind. This is very important. There is something going on in the world right now, and it's involving the entire world's population. And what I'm going to do in the next hour is give you some evidence and some insight into some of the biological things that we're facing, but also how something has gone wrong with the human mind. And almost all of you can think of examples now of this in your lives, your personal lives, and what you've seen with public figures. As introduced, I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. I'm a practicing internist and cardiologist in Dallas, Texas. Brian Parker is my practice partner. We actually published together one of the first papers demonstrating that multi-drug treatment as a protocol worked to reduce the risk of hospitalization and death due to COVID-19. Dr. Proctor caught my attention because he was treating patients early with the best tools that he had and was keeping track of the outcomes on a scoreboard, and that was going up on social media. So wait a minute, somebody's actually doing what really needs to be done. Recently, I was asked for an interview at University of Texas Southwestern Medical School. That's what my little lapel pin is. I got it there. And it was a wonderful acknowledgement. They have said, I'm among the top 30 graduates in the history of the institution, and that's a real honor. In that list includes Joel Goldstein, who's won the Nobel Prize for cholesterol metabolism. It's a real honor to have that type of accolade. And I gave a very extensive video interview, and it was done in a very traditional library, and all these professionals are there, and questions. And they wanted to know the course of my life. The word curriculum vitae in Latin means the course of your life. And so I was giving the course of my life as I was asked by the interviewer. But towards the end, we actually got into the COVID years, the pandemic years. And I made it clear as a top graduate of a top medical school that the medical school itself and its now health system did nothing to help the population of Dallas, Texas, avoid hospitalization and death. Nothing. They didn't open up a single tent. They didn't attempt a single protocol. Nothing. No one in the Department of Medicine or Department of Infectious Diseases to this day professes to be an expert in this illness, professes to have a superior treatment approach in this illness. Not a single medical school in the country has a protocol that they declare is superior to the base National Institutes of Health protocol. I told Tucker Carlson this. It blew his mind. I said, Harvard, there's no Harvard protocol. There's no Mayo Clinic protocol. How could suddenly our blue ribbon medical centers have nothing to offer patients with COVID-19 outside of the baseline protocol? Nothing. Not an ounce of innovation, not an ounce of bravado. And yet these medical centers will tell you, oh, they're number one in heart disease, they're number one in cancer. Well, who's number one in COVID care? Dr. Ladepo, you should hold a meeting in Florida and say, I want to talk to all the health system CEOs. I want to know, where are our centers of excellence in COVID-19 in terms of lesson learned? Let's see comparative mortality among our hospitals. Let's see ventilator use in our hospitals. What were the best practices? What hospitals allowed Americans and Floridians to survive? And let's learn from those hospitals. I find it astonishing that not a single hospital, not a single CEO, not a single chief medical officer, chief of medicine, chief of infectious disease declares that they have any skill or expertise in managing COVID-19 better. This lack of confidence, this lack of self-efficacy, of organizational efficacy is part of this mental disease. It's part of this mental disease. In medicine, And in academic medicine, it's all about bravado. I've given grand rounds at the Mayo Clinic. I've given grand rounds at Harvard Medical School. I just did in 2019. I was the named endowed lecturer in 2 departments at Harvard. It's all about bravado. Who's got the most NIH grants? Who's actually won the most Nobel Prizes? It's all about bravado. The fact that there's no bravado in this 4-year pandemic illness tells you there's something in the minds of academic physicians that is some type of disease process. It's a psychological, sociological disease process. They actually don't want to be any good. For the first time, they don't want to be any good, or they don't care. Do you know there are no grand rounds on what Dr. Garsda presented? None. I've given grand rounds in every medical school in the United States, just about everything in Europe, South America. There are no grand rounds on long COVID or vaccine injury syndrome. State of the art. Nothing. The Biden administration has spent $1 billion on long COVID, and I've read the entire plan. By the way, they don't consider the vaccine could be playing any role in long COVID in the Biden research plan. They spent $1 billion, not a single new drug, not a single protocol. We're 4 years into this. $1 billion for an academic goose egg. All of you are seeing this. These poor patients are suffering. They're going to academic medical centers. They're getting innumerable numbers of imaging studies, blood tests, and what have you, and they're getting no therapy. They're getting nothing to help them through the illness, and they're getting no answers. Well, we're going to provide some answers today. I'm going to start with what we've learned with respect to the virus and in Washington. This is the July 11th report from the Coronavirus Select Committee. Brad Wenstrup, who's a Republican congressman from Ohio, is the chairman. Look at the title of this government report. The proximal origin of a cover-up. Did the Bethesda boys downplay a lab leak? Since when do we have a government report with this type of title? Think about this. This is what we know. The top 2 papers are published by Vineet Menachery as the first author and Ralph Baric as the senior author. Nature Medicine, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, 2015 and 2016, respectively. Look at the title of the papers at the top. It says a Wuhan Institute of Virology 1 virus, a SARS virus, that's poised for human emergence. In these papers at the top, they describe the creation of a chimeric SARS virus that has all the features of SARS-CoV-2 that we know today. They say they've created it. It's a chimeric from a human coronavirus and a bat coronavirus. They've actually been able to create this. And they got it to invade a humanized respiratory epithelial tract in an animal. In the papers, they say it's gain-of-function research that's funded by the National Institutes of Health, National Immunology, Allergy, and Infectious Disease Branch, led by Anthony Fauci. And they say it's gain-of-function because it started before the Obama ban of gain-of-function research funded by the NIH. It was grandfathered in. It says that they thank the EcoHealth Alliance for helping them coordinate the U.S. project with the Chinese. They thank the EcoHealth Alliance. Peter Daszak leads it. And in the papers, they thank the Chinese, Dr. Xingling Li, who actually did the work in China. So it's a U.S. project that was carried out in Wuhan, China. That's what happened. It's in the papers. No one has put these papers up on a screen in Washington. It's right in there. They're talking all around it. They'd want to analyze genetic code. Why not just read the papers? It's right there. In fact, Moderna, towards the end of 2019, had a material transfer agreement with University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Why would they have a material transfer agreement with them? Peter Hotez in Baylor and Houston has been on CNN innumerable times. Okay, I've been on Fox innumerable times. I've gone and tried to tell Americans the truth. Hotez has been behaving like SARS-CoV-2 was a surprise. It was a surprise infection. he had biodefense grants with the Chinese, with Fudong University, to work on vaccines for SARS-CoV-2. It wasn't a surprise to him. He was funded by the National Institutes of Health to work on this. This is deception in the open. That's the reason why Brad Wenstrup's report says, did the Bethesda boys orchestrate a cover-up? Now, the two bottom papers, the first one by Christian Anderson at Scripps, the one about 18 months later by Edwin Holmes in Sydney, this was a core group of people who met with Anthony Fauci, Peter Daszak, the EcoHealth Alliance, with Jeremy Farrar at the Wellcome Trust in the UK, who's now the chief scientist at the WHO, and then the group of scientists. They met early in 2020, and actually in the Fauci emails, they say, what are we going to do about Barrick's papers? It's right there. The decision was deceive the world and say it came out of nature. That was the decision. And this paper, The Natural Origins of SARS-CoV-2, was the first of 12 intentional deception papers that say it came out of nature. Ralph Barrick, who was publishing on coronaviruses in 1992. In fact, he published in our journal, the journal that's edited in my office for many, many years. Yeah, if you can take that down, that would be great. I should just take it down. It kind of blocks me. Yeah. He published in 1992 about coronaviruses. Ralph Barrick should have been in Washington every month telling us how to get out of this predicament. Think about this. It's right there. This is 2015, 2016. These papers haven't been taken down. We had a coronavirus task force, 1 and 2. They should have been putting these papers right up on the slides. This is what we're dealing with. An honest assessment of this would have been an honest assessment. An honest assessment would have been, listen, the US and the Chinese were working on a virus in a lab in China. It got out. The world is getting sick. We're sorry. We're going to get all our resources together and we're going to try to save lives. This got out of hand. That would have been honest. We've gone through 2 presidential administrations, 2 White House task force, 2 HHS secretaries, 3 CDC directors, 2 FDA directors, not an ounce of honesty from any of them. Any of them. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. None of them. It's a biopharmaceutical complex. This is very important. It's a complex. The complex is a complicated syndicate. At the top, we think it's the World Economic Forum. They have a global leaders program. They've been training for years. They're installed in governments all over the world, including our Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, who refuses to release the documents from the Wuhan lab to the House and the Senate. World Economic Forum leader, our Director of National Intelligence. Avril Haines, the one who was involved in Event 201 in the fall. In fall of 2019, she was paired up with George Gao from the Chinese CDC. Their scenario that they worked out in Event 201, you can watch the video. How do we deceive the world on where the virus came from the lab? It was already practiced. She had already practiced it. It was on film, and she's doing it in real life right now. She's not releasing the documents. Why does the National Security Administration, the Department of State, the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Energy, why do they have statements on their website about the origins of SARS-CoV-2? Why? What Josh Hawley in the Senate thinks is because they're involved in this. This is a deep, deep U.S.-Chinese collaboration. Very deep. And nobody wants to tell the world the truth on what really happened. Why did it get everybody so sick? Everybody's involved. This is very deep. You got the Chinese lab in Wuhan. It's a biosecurity level 3 lab. The virus is actually created in a BSL 3 level lab. Now, in 2007, Stéphane Bainzel, a very handsome, wonderful man with a great accent, is a pharmaceutical rep for Lilly, and then he becomes a supervisor for Belgium. In 2007, he becomes the CEO of bioMérieux. That's like Abbott Laboratories. That is a big conglomerate company. His job from 2007 to 2011, ordered by Jacques Chirac of France by contract with the Chinese, is to build the biosecurity annex level 4 in Wuhan. That's Stefan Bancel. So Bancel is called up before the Senate, and Rand Paul is asking him questions. Why didn't Rand Paul ask him, hey, Stefan, how many times have you been to Wuhan? Tell us about how you train the Chinese. No questions. So I was critical of Rand Paul. He's got a book out. He's going to go after Fauci. That's all wonderful. I was critical of Rand Paul. And I got a text at 6 o'clock in the morning from Ron Johnson who said, attaboy. Because everybody seems to be involved in this. Everyone. Everybody is playing a role in this choreography. Can't call Ralph Barrick up and ask him some questions. Can't ask Stefan Bancel, what about the material transfer agreement with UNC and Chapel Hill? Can't ask about the Wuhan lab. Everybody just wants to dance around the edges and not get to the heart of the matter. Biological threat laboratories are big business now. They're going on everywhere. You probably heard about the Chinese having one in California recently. Remember, gain-of-function research is not outlawed. It's just that the NIH will not fund gain-of-function research. You can have plenty of gain-of-function research if somebody else pays for it. So I recently testified in the Arizona Senate, and they're making great progress. And they said, Dr. McCullough, give us something actionable that we can do. Give us something tangible. I said, why don't you do an inventory of gain-of-function research in your state? Just start to figure out where these biological labs are. Because listen, if it can sneak out of a lab in Wuhan, China, it certainly could come out of a lab at Arizona State or University of Arizona. Why doesn't everybody ask about this? What is going on? Is this science for science sake, or is this actually creating pathogens that can make us sick? There was a release from Boston University about a year ago, and they had announced they had created chimeric, kind of the lethality of the original virus and the infectiousness of Omicron. And the preprint was a release like it was a success. We did it. And then it was a backlash. Wait a minute, this isn't a biosecurity level 3 lab in Boston. What if it got out in Boston? And the dean and everybody got involved and said, wait a minute, what are you doing? What are you doing? This money is flowing. Money is flowing from the U.S. military through DARPA, the research unit of the military, and BARDA, the kind of biological threat unit of the NIH, and through other divisions. A lot of times it's paired funding. Tons of funding is coming from this biopharmaceutical complex. So let's name them. World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, United Nations, Rockefeller Foundation, Gates Foundation, CEPI, which CEPI was formed between the World Economic Forum and the Gates Foundation. CEPI, that's the business plan that John Lee handed me. The business plan says there's going to be a series of pandemics, and each time there'll be only one answer, a new vaccine. CEPI is a vaccine incubator. They have Gavi, UNITAID, UNAID, all the regulatory agencies, TGA in Australia, SAFRA in South Africa, MHRA in the UK, CDC, NIH, and FDA in the United States. They're coordinated. If you get a list of people who go to Davos, Switzerland every year, you'll see members of all these organizations going there. Why are they going there? I analyzed the agenda for the World Economic Forum last meeting they had. 22% of it was on economics. 78% of it is on something else. Transhumanism, global warming, 15-minute cities. It's all out in the open. Klaus Schwab, who heads the World Economic Forum, in 2017 published a book called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. In that, he says the environment stays the same, like our environment's the same, but the human being changes. Human being changes. And he says, in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the winner takes all. Well, what does he mean? Is he the winner? Does he win and we lose? What does that actually mean? Elon Musk, owner of Twitter, but also Tesla and all these, he's got a company called Neurodial, where somehow the brain is going to be changed. And there's, again, it's transhumanism. And then Schwab follows up in 2020, a few months after the pandemic, with a book ready to go. And his book says, COVID-19, the Great Reset. He says, this is a limited opportunity to establish a new world order. Then we see this kind of global lockstep. Rockefeller Foundation, part of this, what we believe is this biopharmaceutical complex, in 2012 publishes a manifesto, and they use the word lockstep to get the world to all do the same thing at the same time. Human beings can't agree on anything. How can we get the entire world to take a vaccine? Think about that. You can't get anybody to agree on anything. But yet it happened. This elaborate, it looks like it was well planned. I don't know, but it looks like it's well planned. This syndicate that I've described is a conglomerate of mainly non-governmental organizations that has the freedom, the economic freedom that we don't enjoy. Gates Foundation invests millions in BioNTech, gets out billions. The type of wealth generation that they had is extraordinary. The Gates Foundation has a memorandum of understanding with the FDA. What does that mean? Since when? Are they calling the shots? 9 out of 10 of the last FDA commissioners that we've had are working in the complex. Stephen Hahn, our last one before Robert Califf, is somebody who I know from Duke. Stephen Hahn now works for Flagship. They are the venture capital firm for Moderna. The FDA commissioner before him, Scott Gottlieb, he works for Pfizer. Now remember, the pharmaceutical companies are part of the complex, but only as suppliers. It doesn't look like they're calling the shots. They're the suppliers. They're actually also the ones to take the public pummeling while the complex continues to roll. Ben Taub, the lead public health official for the UK, he works for Moderna. Same thing with the lead Danish public health official. So after their tour on fighting COVID, they now work for the company that they supported. So we're all watching this play out. This is like a movie, except for it's like a mind-blowing reality, and it's so hard to explain to people. They say, well, you're a conspiracy theorist if you say that. Well, here's something you can use. You can say, you know what, I'm a rational theorist. That is, I have rational ideas and thoughts about things. We all have theories. They're testable. We can discuss them. We can cite data. We can cite public utterances. I think the public utterances are pretty important. What people say matters. If Bill Gates said, which he did on April 20th, 2020, this will not end until effectively everybody takes a vaccine, we should take him at his word. He actually thinks that. And since he controls the world's largest non-governmental organization, with a massive string of funding to major universities in the United States, we should take it seriously. It's very important for us to understand that we have to develop our own rational theories. And we have to turn words around so it's constructive. Here's the virus. Everyone recognizes the structure. The ball is a nucleocapsid. All the lethality of this is in the spike protein. Without the spike protein, this is a relatively harmless ball. Remember, human beta coronaviruses are relatively innocuous forms of common colds. The spike protein is about 1,200 amino acids. It's got a dozen or so glycosylation side chains, a pivotal furin cleavage joint that allowed it to invade human respiratory epithelial cells. Its receptor is the ACE2 receptor. Everybody understands that. Dr. Garza did a great job laying that out. It's about 3,400 base pairs that code for this. The fundamental mechanism by which the spike protein is cleared from the body is the ACE2 receptor. So there's receptor-mediated disposal of it. That's the reason why with the natural infection, you only get the S2 segment in the human body. The S1 segment, I'm sorry. You don't get the S2 segment. When you take the vaccine, you get the full-length spike protein, but it's held in the pre-fusion conformation. So human ACE2 receptors are now irrelevant once the vaccine is taken. The receptors can't clear it. Children are loaded with ACE2 receptors, and that's the reason why they just kind of mow down this virus like it's nothing. Older people, we become very deficient in the ACE2 receptors. Well, I published an analysis with the Italians, probably the best one that exists. Turns out one of the ways to actually upregulate ACE2 receptors is to take an ACE inhibitor, which is kind of interesting. And those who did take ACE inhibitors enjoyed a better survival than those who didn't, even though the data are somewhat mixed on this. But so receptor-mediated disposal of the spike protein is the only way we can think of that we can understand mechanistically to get rid of the spike protein. Once it's installed in the pre-fusion conformation, there is no evidence that it can be cleared by the human body. There are no human peptidases that can attack it. And whether that was intentional or just as a part of its engineering design by Pfizer, Moderna, and the other companies, and how the Chinese collaborated, it's impossible to know. But it's all about this spike protein. We can't learn enough about it because, as Dr. Garza pointed out, it goes everywhere in the human body. There's about 29 proteins in this virus. It's not that complicated. Hakim and colleagues published, when you get the natural infection, you form a library of at least 15 measurable antibodies against different components of the virus. And clearly we developed cellular-based immunity to recognize it, but also kill it with natural killer cells. So the natural infection, of course, would be far more powerful and effective than just presenting the spike protein to the body as an antigen with the vaccine. So I'll follow this outline. I'll make a few comments with respect to each one of these. One of the reasons why we can tell that the human mind is not thinking correctly and our medical leaders are not thinking correctly is that they're not demanding safety, safety, safety. Do you know it's really hard to get a drug FDA approved? Do you know the FDA turns down drug applications all the time? Do you know the FDA pulls hundreds of drugs off the market per year? But yet with these vaccines, there's not a single concern regarding safety. I had a concern. This is August of 2020. I published this in The Hill. Scott Atlas and I were recruited to write a series of op-eds. This was widely read by those in the House, the Senate, and the White House. And look at the title of the op-ed. It's still on their website. This was a gamble. And I told the world it was a gamble because the vaccines were the genetic code for the lethal spike protein. How are we going to shut off this genetic code? How are we going to control how much spike protein is being delivered? If people could die with the virus, they sure as hell could die with the vaccine. It was obvious to anybody with any type of understanding of biology that this would be a gamble. Gamble. Do you know I'm the only public figure who actually published something like this? You can't find a single paper in the peer-reviewed literature. You can't find a single op-ed. You can't find it. Scott Atlas, in his book about his time in the White House, mentions his op-eds in The Hill. What he tells America is that every day he met with Trump, Deborah Birx, Mark Meadows, and all they did for 9 months is talk about masks, lockdowns, and waiting for a vaccine. Not once in Scott's book did he mention treatment. I believe him. I believe his book. People were completely oblivious to the hope of early treatment. What we knew as the vaccines advanced, we took us several months to get this paper together, 57 authors, 17 countries. We had major safety concerns. Within a few months, it was explosive in the literature. We had all of these questions. I won't read them all for you, but you can see that this was released without any fundamental understanding of a biological product of what this would do in the human body. None. And I think Rubin said it best, the editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, who's on one of the vaccine advisory panels. He says, we're not going to know what's going to happen to kids when they take this shot until we just start vaccinating kids. He said that. Again, that's a sign of some type of disease process in the human mind. No reasonable person would say that. No one would put, the future of America at risk with these vaccines and say a statement like that. What do we know? It was obvious by 2021, every indicator was off the Richter scale. The vaccines weren't safe. There's about 150 deaths reported to the Vaccine University Vet Reporting System per year. It can happen. Someone in a nursing home takes a flu shot. There's some other circumstances they die. The healthcare worker reports it to VAERS, which they should. I've made dozens of reports to VAERS, as I should. VAERS is a system that healthcare personnel report. Paper by Meisner and colleagues in 2016 reported. Who reports to VAERS? 86% of the time. It's a doctor, it's a nurse, it's a paramedic. This is our reporting system. So we were reporting to the CDC, these data from April, that things were off the Richter scale in terms of adverse events and deaths. Now, if we fast forward, look at this. This is, Dr. Gasta showed you the VAERS system, which includes Japan and Germany, I toggled over just the U.S. We are at 18,168 there deaths. These are Americans. Now look at the frequency distribution. 1,150 have died on the same day they take the shot. Some die in the vaccine center. No concern by the CDC. On 3 occasions, they said, we reviewed the deaths, they're not due to the vaccine. Even the ones where they die in the vaccine center, the CDC is telling America they're not due to the vaccine. These are people healthy enough to walk in a vaccine center. I've heard ridiculous arguments saying, well, there's an actuarial risk of death. Any one of us could drop dead at any single day. This is just what happens when you do a vaccine program. I said, no, this is in the context of people concerned about their health and they're walking into a vaccine center. No special analysis, no alarm bells, no warning to Americans, and people are dying on the same day of the vaccine. I wanted to know what was going on. I interviewed paramedic Harry Fisher. It's on my Substack, Courageous Discourse, Oklahoma paramedic. I said, Harry, you were working as a paramedic during these early days of the vaccine program? He goes, oh yeah. He goes, we were getting 911 calls for cardiac arrest in the vaccine center. We were doing CPR and shocking the person who just took the vaccine. And he says, I remember looking over my shoulder and I saw this long line of people and no one got out of line. Again, the disease is in the human mind. People gripped in fear, they were watching other people take a vaccine and die in front of them, and they were going to be mentally numb to this reality and still go forward and take the shot. What we've learned, this is a very, very important paper, probably one of the most, Schmeling and colleagues. I've personally met and reviewed the data with Rebecca Manichi from Denmark. 1/3 of people who take these shots, 0 side effects that we can see, 0. And it looks like they don't, from the very beginning, if there's not a sore arm, they don't feel anything, we don't see anything evolving. It's almost as if nothing's in it. About 2/3 of the shots, people have some moderate side effects, and then a huge amount of the serious cases are in a small number of vials, small number. Most of them were early vials, by the way, Manichi told me. So the vials are not the same. Now, the leading theory is that maybe there's hyperconcentration of messenger RNA, aggregation of lipid nanoparticles, contamination of cDNA, we had a whole lecture on this morning, or other forms of impurities. But there is clearly a drug product safety problem. When there's lot-to-lot variation, that's an immediate recall. That would take Tylenol off the market. Senator Ron Johnson had all the U.S. data which matched this. He took it to the CDC and FDA. They said nothing to see here. We clearly have a manufacturing problem. On their website, Pfizer says they have 40 quality inspections for each vial, yet there's not been a single good manufacturing process report generated for us, and not a single independent inspection of these vials. You can see this is form-fruit evidence that we've got a major, major problem on our hand. Every bit of news we've had on these vaccines is bad. Major areas of damage to the body: cardiovascular, neurological, hematological, and immunological. There's not enough time to go through all these. There are now thousands and thousands of peer-reviewed papers, despite bias by the journals and the editorial boards to try to block all these papers. Can you imagine how many papers would exist if there was actually a fair process of receiving them? Do you know there's not a single paper in the New England Journal of Medicine, JAMA, or Lancet pointing out a major safety issue? That it's all lower-level journals because we keep trying to penetrate. I know. I have over 70 peer-reviewed papers myself in COVID-19. It's nearly impossible to publish a paper right now because of the bias influenced, we think, by this biopharmaceutical complex and this diseased groupthink that exists among academic doctors. Most of the doctors took the shots themselves. Most of the editorial staff, most of the judicial branch, almost all the courts, they all took the shots themselves. As soon as someone takes the shots, the first thing they'll tell you is, I don't want to hear about it. They give you the Heisman. And this occurs in the court. Case dismissed. Case dismissed. I don't want to hear about this. I had a chance to testify multiple times in military court. I used to get JAG attorneys, now I get DOJ attorneys. And once they give me a chance, I start to describe what the vaccine does in the body. You can imagine a young JAG attorney, kind of with all the drama. Remember that movie with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise? Do you remember Tom Cruise is the JAG attorney and he starts, it's basically like that. That's how terrified people are about what's in their body right now. They can't come to grips with this. It's a psychological problem. You see it all the time. I don't want to talk about it. One time I asked the young Tom Cruise, I said, "You want a little break to compose yourself while I go into this in greater detail?" People can't help but think what's in their body. The biggest conflict of interest of any manuscript published on the vaccines is, did the people themselves take the shots who are authors? And did the universities promote the shots or mandate the shots? And does the paper say the vaccines are safe and effective? It's the biggest conflict of interest in the world. The only people who can be unconflicted are those who didn't take the shots, or those who took the shots and have the intellectual honesty, the maturity, the strength, and the courage to recognize that they've made a personal health mistake. That's the bottom line. 3,400 peer-reviewed papers now in case reports, and this is a gross underestimate of what's really happening. Look at these papers, Crossan and colleagues, Harvard. Messenger RNA is stuck in the human heart in people who are dying after these vaccines. Now, they didn't have a good spike protein assay, but the heart is basically being destroyed with inflammation in these cases. I bet it's loaded with spike protein as well. But messenger RNA is at the scene of the crime of cardiac injury. It's there. This is an important paper, because if this messenger RNA coding for the spike protein is stuck in the human heart, I can promise you that messenger RNA for various influenza antigens or RSV antigens is also going to be targeting the heart, because the heart muscle cells will take up indiscriminately lipid nanoparticles and messenger RNA. Baumeier and colleagues found spike protein in human heart with myocarditis. The myocarditis is caused by the vaccines, the full-length spike protein. Okay, it's as clear as it can be. This paper, Schreckenberg just showed that there is direct cardiotoxicity of messenger RNA. Let me go back just for a second. I don't have a build on this. They put Pfizer and they put Moderna separately on rat cardiomyocytes. Within 48 hours, the heart muscle cells start to develop abnormal contractile and depolarization patterns. It's direct cardiotoxicity. If this experiment would have been done with any drug in the preclinical drug development program, chances are it would have been killed. It's directly cardiotoxic. Now this paper, this just came out, Nakahara and colleagues, 700 people who took the vaccines, 300 people who didn't, cardiac positron emission tomography. Now PET scans, normally the human heart prefers free fatty acids as its fuel. When the heart muscles become diseased, ischemic, or cardiomyopathic, they prefer glucose. The PET scans identify uptake of fluorodeoxyglucose. Look on the right there, that intensely red staining left ventricle, that is uptake of fluorodeoxyglucose in a vaccine recipient. And look on the left, that's a kind of an amorphous pattern of just somebody who's not taking up FGG. That's a normal pattern on the left. Virtually everybody's heart PET scan becomes abnormal at least out to 16 months, 18 months after, or 6 months after the shots, maybe longer. That's what this Nakahara paper. University of Texas at Houston is a major author on this paper. What I'm telling you is we now have in the last 2 months evidence of direct cardiotoxicity and cardiomyopathy, metabolic cardiomyopathy, that may be in the absence of histologic myocarditis and could explain a wealth of phenomenon that we're seeing, including cardiac arrest in the absence of myocarditis. Cardiac arrest in the presence of an autopsy, what looks like a morphologic heart. But it could be very abnormal, as the PET studies show. Yonker and colleagues from Harvard, these are children hospitalized with myocarditis. We should have no American children in U.S. hospitals hospitalized with vaccine myocarditis. They're hospitalized, what does he find? He finds that children with myocarditis have circulating spike protein, and the antibodies are not neutralizing it. And the children who don't have myocarditis have spike protein, but the antibodies are neutralizing it. This explains part of the mystery of who gets direct heart damage, who doesn't. Some children don't raise a library of antibodies to neutralize the spike protein enough. This is published in Circulation. This is our best cardiology research journal. Cardiologists know this. Do you know right now the American College of Cardiology fully supports vaccination? They say the benefits far outside the risk. Why would a cardiology association even opine on a vaccine? I wrote them. I felt a duty to summarize this for them. No response. I wrote them again, a little bit more forcefully. I'm a senior person in cardiology, one of the most published people in the field in history. I said this will not end well for any cardiologist who's supporting these vaccines. Complete silence. This is a paper I published, Jessica Rose. Myocarditis occurs on the first shot, the second shot, the third shot, peak age 18 to 24, but it extends all the way up into the older age groups, 90% men, so there's something special with probably androgen receptors. It's hitting the healthiest population, our soldiers, our athletes. It's basically a disaster for young people, our college students. You know, there's not a single dean or provost that's apologized for this. Not a single one that's expressed an ounce of concern over myocarditis, yet there's case after well-documented case of college students developing fatal myocarditis. They don't care. Again, the disease is not caring about human life. Here's another paper published, this is from Yale, showing the MRI changes when they exist in myocarditis are not clearing up by at least 9 months in this study. There's a paper from Taiwan showing a year they're still there. Small areas of inflammation called late gadolinium enhancement can resolve. The human heart can remodel. That's been shown previously, and I'm observing this in my practice. A large area of damage to the heart is considered 15% of the left ventricle. So we're seeing 3 and 4, 7% areas of damage recover and actually go away if we actually do serial MRIs. But big ones are not. Jenna Shawa, in 2 papers in pediatrics, she's reporting in children 22%, 25% areas of damage of the left ventricle. This is astonishing in children who have taken the vaccine in the journal Pediatrics. Now the fatal cases. Choi and colleagues, 22-year-old man, Korea, takes the vaccine, goes into a Korean hospital with chest pain, and he's dead 7 hours later. They can't save him in the hospital. Has his cardiac arrest in the hospital. His heart's destroyed. The conduction system is destroyed with inflammation and autopsy. They conclude it's fatal Pfizer vaccine myocarditis. Papers like this should be a showstopper. There should be emergency medical meetings by the FDA, the CDC. Every single health system advising these should have emergency meetings about this. Every single university should have an emergency meeting with their dean and provost and say, listen, young college-age man has just died definitively of the vaccine. No question. Yet there's no concern. None. College kids should be out in droves protesting this. They should be protesting this. Say, listen, we could die with these vaccines. The kids themselves have no concern. They'll protest something else, but they won't protest this. It's as plain as day. This paper, Gill, Archives of Pathology, 2 kids, 16 and 17. They take Pfizer. The parents find them dead in bed. They call the medical examiner, the police, the paramedics. They do autopsies. The coroner says, I better get some help. He calls in University of Michigan, University of Minnesota. They analyze the slides. They conclude it's fatal Pfizer messenger RNA myocarditis. That's the conclusion of this paper. Now, interestingly, they also surmise, as in other papers, and I think this is right, that the trigger for the death is a surge of adrenaline. The surge of adrenaline is occurring during sports and occurring between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. in the normal waking cycle, and when a fire alarm goes off at about 11 o'clock at night. But the kids are dead. This should have had parents marching out in the streets saying this could happen to our children. Yet, apparently no concern. It can't be any more clear than this. She understood, Fabian Trump. She's an Olympic marathoner. She takes 3 shots. It's publicly known. She says, I got myocarditis, I'm not going to exercise. She made the right choice. We have guidelines in cardiology. If there's myocarditis, it's already known that exercise can trigger a cardiac arrest. That's been in our guidance documents, in our textbooks for decades. We never let people with myocarditis exercise. Do you know that during 2020, there was such a concern that COVID could cause myocarditis that the NCAA Big Ten screened every athlete who got COVID. 30% of the athletes got COVID. They had this tiers, they had blood biomarkers, EKG, MRIs. They found a handful of cases of putative myocarditis, no hospitalizations or deaths. They gave up on it. Their conclusion is COVID itself doesn't cause serious myocarditis. The U.S. military had the same thing, the Israeli military. They dropped it. Now they bring in the vaccines. The FDA says the vaccines cause myocarditis by June of 2021, and all the athletic leagues say, vaccinate them. The day that the NFL mandated the vaccines on the players, they knew the FDA had said the vaccines caused myocarditis, and they didn't care. No screening, no concern whatsoever. The disease is in people's minds. You would never recommend a vaccine that causes myocarditis to athletes with no risk mitigation. And of course, the athletes have no significant risks of COVID. So putting myocarditis together, you can tell I'm a cardiologist. I'll stay on the cardiology topic since neurology and others have been well covered. Looks like this, and the slides are available to you. There's about 200 slides. I'm only showing you about 60, so I've really worked hard on these. But the vaccine clearly installs the genetic code for the spike protein. The spike protein and the messenger RNA is in the human heart. Of the cases with myocarditis, the rate in 3 studies now that's determined myocarditis clinically manifest is about 2.5%, which is a huge number. People take the shot. Half of that 2.5 is readily apparent, half is subclinical. They have chest pain, signs and symptoms of heart failure, cardiac arrest. We measure blood tests, high sensitivity troponin, BNP, galectin-3, ST2. We can add others. We get EKGs and echocardiograms, MRIs. And by the way, this MRI is showing the characteristic area. It's almost always the inferior lateral wall, and it always involves the outer part of the myocardium and the pericardium. So myopericarditis is probably a better term. And that we have to do things. My characteristic approach is I put people on a 3-month taper of prednisone. I use colchicine for a full year, which is in our guidelines. The Japanese are using IVIG or plasmapheresis. People are doing other things. But it has to be treated. The myocarditis has to be treated. And then on top of that, those with symptomatic heart failure, early left ventricular dysfunction, I'm using ACE inhibitors and beta blockers and other drugs. And then I'm agonizing over the decision about do they return to sports or not. So we have a very important case that's occurred. And the player is Oscar Cabrero Adames. He's a Dominican player. In 2021, he doesn't want to take the shots. He's actually speaking about it. He goes, no, I don't want to take these shots. He takes them against his will so he can play in the Spanish league. He has a cardiac arrest on the floor. He does a faceplant. He gets CPR. And then he survives. He tweets out, he says, I have myocarditis from the vaccine, and that's what caused my cardiac arrest. So he's honest. He's one of the few honest people. 2 years later, he's going through all this. He's trying to return, and he dies on the treadmill. He dies on a medical treadmill. It must have been a terrible cardiac arrest. I've supervised treadmills my entire cardiology career. I've never had somebody die on the treadmill. It must have been awful for the cardiologist and everybody there. But he's an important case. It's possible to take 2 shots in 2021 and have a cardiac arrest that's fatal in 2023. All of these deaths that we're seeing, based on our analysis, that are unexplained in young people, are the vaccine until proven otherwise. Andrew Dunnigan, who's the former pastor of Highland Park Presbyterian Church, recruited there for a year. I used to attend. He's 44 years old. He's fit. He's trim. Young father. The future of the church. A week ago, his wife reached over and he's cold and dead in bed. Just like the 2 kids in Connecticut. We try to reach out. We try to have a discussion. John Leake gets involved. John's mother gets involved. The church elders say, he died of natural causes. The reason why we're in trouble is because of a mental disease, a psychiatric, a sociological, psychological, some type of group phenomenon that's over people's minds. What spouse would not be concerned? What spouse would not want to investigate? What decent human being wouldn't want to warn others so someone else doesn't die and have the same fate as their husband? Who wouldn't have that compassion? Ernesto Ramirez in South Texas, his son took the Pfizer vaccine. He died of myocarditis. I looked at the autopsy. Ernesto Ramirez went nuts. He's trying to warn everybody else. There's a father of a young boy, Sean, up in Canada. Same thing. So why does the light turn on in some people and they think it's horrific and they're trying to warn others? Steve Kirsch, who's a millionaire, he took the shots. He regrets it. He saw people dying. He said, wait a minute, stop taking the shots. Why is Steve alarmed, but the next person who took the shots is not? It's something that our psychologists need to help us with. Here's Adamus. This is very important. We've performed a synthesis of all the autopsy studies. By the way, when it's myocarditis and we think it's myocarditis, at autopsy, it's fatal myocarditis. We got it. The next patient with myocarditis is dies. It's not a mystery. It's myocarditis. Now, it's not just myocarditis. This paper by Zi and colleagues from China caught my eye. This is a huge study at the time. It's like 1.5 million vaccinated, 500,000 unvaccinated. Retinal artery scans. What did they find? After 2 injections, there's a 4-fold increased rate of arterial and venous small thrombi in the eye. Remember Dr. Garsta showed you the dark field microscopy or that type of technique showing the clumping? They're seeing it in the eye in retinal scans in a huge number of people. Now, the risks are much higher if one took the vaccine, but the conclusion of the authors are these little blood clots, they're not forming in the eye. They're from elsewhere in the human body. This is systemic. So without protection, the vaccines will do more harm. Now, this is the horrible part of it. Pfizer knew in their 90-day mandatory post-marketing documents, they knew about 1,223 deaths. People were dying right away with Pfizer. In December and January, people were calling Pfizer. Pfizer was writing up the vignettes, and it was clear. There was nothing else going on outside of they took the Pfizer vaccine, and the family thought they died. Pfizer thought they died. Pfizer reported these to VAERS, as they should. Pfizer wanted to cover this up, and the lawyers for the FDA wanted to cover this up for 55 years. Did not want to release this. This observation alone is enough. 5, 10, 15, no more than 50 deaths off the market. By my estimates, even watching what came in at VAERS, they should have been off the market early in January. Some have said now, by a deep forensic analysis of the clinical trials, that they never should have been approved. There was actually more deaths with Pfizer in the clinical trials program, and because the deaths from the time of the data cutoff to the time of the VRBAC meeting, they missed a 3-fold increase in cardiac mortality just there. They should have never gotten out of the gate. Our autopsy study, our global autopsy study of all the autopsies done, re-adjudicated, reanalyzed, analyzed by experts, was immediately censored by Lancet. What we found is that 74% of all the deaths of everybody who died after the vaccine are directly caused by the vaccine. Now, someone can die of, towards the end of cancer. We didn't call every single death, but the next person who dies, and there's no other explanation. By the way, death is always known in the United States. 40% is known heart disease, 40% known cancer, 20% known causes. You should not accept an unknown death. Oh, they just died. Someone who just died, which is now the leading cause of death in most places, someone who died, it's most likely the vaccine, unless the family comes out and tells you it's not the vaccine. And believe me, when it's not the vaccine, that's the first thing the family will tell you. The first thing. So the vaccines are not safe for human use. World Council for Health says get them off the market. This is an evidence-based organization. Dr. Tess Lowry will actually be in Dallas next week. She represents an organization. AAPS, Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, look at recommendation number 10. Pull them off the market. So it's not your opinion. You've got one global organization. You've got one physician organization. I hope this organization draws an official statement as vaccines being in the environment that people can face to pull them off the market. Let's have all the organizations put statement after statement up on their website to indicate, listen, it's not just our opinion. Let's get them off the market. I've done so in the U.S. Senate in 2022, the European Parliament 2023. Everywhere where I testify, the House of Representatives is talking to me right now. Again, I will make that public call for them to be removed off the market. It's been 3 years of this. The only way the public will be safe from any more of ongoing injury, as if where we are right now isn't bad enough, is to get them off the market. What did the vaccines ever do? Dr. Ladepo yesterday said, well, maybe they stopped the infection with the early trials. What we know is there's been claims that are unsupportable. They don't prevent new infections, certainly not with the new strains. They don't stop transmission. Our CDC director said that. They don't reduce hospitalization and death. They do not reduce severity because none of the randomized trials ever showed that. And they were not going to prevent an outbreak reoccurrence. Why are doctors so sold on these vaccines? Because there's a ton of studies claiming the vaccines reduce hospitalization and death. Why are these studies out there? Well, because there's sources of bias in these studies, leading us to an incorrect conclusion. The sources of bias come from the fact that the virus became milder. The vaccines didn't handle this. The virus became milder. The electronic medical records, their default is unvaccinated, so they claimed all these vaccinated people were unvaccinated. No linkage to the CDC data, no control for early treatment and natural immunity, which are the reasons why people avoid the hospitalization and death. No adjudication of hospital illness. There was actually differential testing that occurred in the hospital, more so in the unvaccinated. And then conflict of interest. These doctors all took the shot. They want to show it works. They want to believe that it works. Even the consent form doesn't claim the vaccines reduce transmission or reduce hospitalization and death. All they say is past tense. They've been shown to reduce the rate of COVID-19 illness. So the next time the CDC or the FDA or HHS has a commercial, protect your grandmother, protect yourself, and people get up there, well, they reduce severe disease. The consent form doesn't even say that. People are making claims that are fraudulent claims, not even if the consent, listen, a valid claim would be in the benefit section of the consent form. It's not there. The Omicron broke through natural immunity. There are 2 Japanese papers, by the way, that suggest Omicron actually may have been lab released. But it was interesting. It closed the immunologic door immediately on Delta and became a much milder syndrome, December of 2021. And it, one could get it over and over again. So Omicron was very different. We've been in the Omicron outbreak now for the last 2 years of the pandemic. Data have come in. This is from Scotland, but they exist elsewhere. Cleveland Clinic has the identical data. Those who take the vaccines over and over again, they actually paradoxically have a higher risk of hospitalization and death. The unvaccinated look the best. Now, the majority of the unvaccinated here have already had the illness, right? So they have natural immunity. Those who've taken the vaccine have also had the illness, but they're getting it over and over again. Money is changing hands at a record rate. A blockbuster drug used to cost $500 million in development over 15 to 20 years, and in its first year would earn $1 billion. Now with these vaccines, the companies had virtually no development costs. The U.S. government funded this. They have no pharmaceutical costs, sales force costs, and they earned $1 billion. You can see how hard people may actually work and cross the line into fraud, deception, malfeasance to earn $1 billion, $100 billion. It's 100x what they used to earn. The money is now beyond belief. We've been through, by the way, 2 national emergencies, 2 public health emergencies, 2 worldwide emergencies, SARS-CoV-2, and guess what? Monkeypox. Monkeypox was a U.S. public health emergency. Again, billions of dollars flowed to people in the complex for monkeypox. You barely knew about it because we got ahead of it in the media. I was up almost every night saying, no, we got this under control. There was a case in Dallas. He didn't spread it anywhere. We've got a drug that works. Spread by sexual contact. Biden administration with no fanfare. End of January, no more monkeypox emergency. Get ready. Gates, Tedros, Fauci, Hotez, they all say there's going to be another pandemic. There's going to be another pandemic. All the experts believe it's probably going to be another infectious virus similar to COVID that likely is going to come out of a biological threat laboratory. It's all there. It's all laid out for us, so it probably will. You probably ought to be kind of positioning yourself for this. So we always need this pivot to early therapy, vaccinated or not, to treat them. These are the two papers. Many of you were involved in this, Dr. Proctor. What we said is, listen, we don't have time for large randomized trials. We're 4 years into it. We still don't have large, prospective, double-blind, multi-drug, randomized, placebo-controlled trials. We don't have them. We're not going to. What we said is, listen, a small number of people need to be treated, precautionary principle. We want drugs with a signal of benefit, acceptable safety, and we're going to put drugs in combination. With serious infections, we don't rely on a single drug. It's ridiculous. Don't be fooled when someone says, aha, the answer is this single thing, this supplement, this drug. We don't even use single drugs for staph infections. Come on. It's going to be multiple drugs in combination. We said there's 3 phases to the illness. We think this is the right conceptualization of the disease early on. It was a long disease. Do you know the average person who died of COVID died well a month into it? And then most of them died at the end of thrombosis, all the autopsy studies at the end. By the time the NIH said to give remdesivir, they were actually hypoxemic due to blood clots. That's how ridiculous this was. There is one study that shows remdesivir actually has a clinical benefit. It's done by Gottlieb. He was my former practice partner in Dallas. It's serial IV infusions done from day 1 as an outpatient. Nobody did that. It's not feasible. The WHO said don't use remdesivir by November of 2020 because there was no mortality benefit. It was used way too late in the illness, and it caused, in some people, kidney injury and liver damage. The correct thing to do was what we did. We used intracellular anti-infectives, antibodies, corticosteroids, immunomodulators, antiplatelet drugs, and we got people through the illness. 2 papers, one by Hazen, one by Jackie Stone, showed that we can treat people deeply hypoxemic at home. O2 saturations in the 70s. I did this with people at home. If any of my patients would have went into the ER, they would have been immediately intubated, paralyzed and sedated, and they would have potentially died on the ventilator. None of this was needed. None of it. Dr. Proctor learned how to use IV therapies. Some people actually were hospitalized because they became dehydrated. They needed volume support. But COVID was always an outpatient management illness. Not a single medical center in this great state of Texas had a major outpatient protocol for its patients. Shame on them. Shame on the University of Texas system. Shame on Baylor College of Medicine. Shame on all the major health systems. They couldn't lift a finger to help a single person. It took people like us in this room to do everything we could in our practices, in our beneficence to our patients, our obligation to our patients to take care of them. Most important thing I learned is about virucidal nasal sprays and washes. Just a few drops of iodine and some salt water. It could be colloidal silver. It could be xylitol. It could be one of many different substances. The virus replicates in the nose and mouth for 5 days. It must be killed. It does not completely kill, but at least knocked down so mucosal immunity can take it on. You can't allow nasal congestion and a sore throat to brew for 5 days and start gobbling ivermectin. It's too late. We have to start in the nose and mouth. 17 studies. Look at this one by Chowdhury. This is impressive. Everybody's got COVID. It has an active control group of warm water. The PCR dropped by day 3. This was the answer. Masks didn't stop the spread of the illness, but this would have. This would have stopped spread of the illness. Look at this. There were reductions in hospitalization and death just with a nasal spray and gargle done every 4 hours. This is how impressive this is. Nancy Mace, congressman, she found out about this in 2021. She says, why is our government not telling us about this? This is not about wearing masks or lockdowns. 17 randomized trials. This is as good as you get. This is the answer, by the way, for the next pandemic, is everybody should have a virucidal nasal spray and wash. There are even studies. The trials are very good. This is a randomized trial, xylitol-based, effective. We use drugs off-label, as we should have, because the FDA tells us to do so. Our medical boards, our pharmacy boards, were going directly against FDA guidance, directly against it, and they didn't care because they were getting orders, we think, from above. This is the only answer. Okay. The U.S. Federal Trade Commission sued every company making a nasal spray and tried to kill their approach to helping patients. We came up with a home treatment guide, AEPS, in October of 2020. If this would have been followed like the Great Barrington Declaration, these 2 guides would have guided America out of this. The House of Representatives still has not had a single doctor testify who actually saw a COVID patient and knew how to treat it. My biggest criticism of both White House administrations is get some doctors in there who are real doctors and know how to treat patients, and quit getting TV pundits in there or people from schools of public health. Let's get some real doctors in there who treat patients. We had, by December 2020, we had clear and convincing evidence that early treatment was reducing the risks of hospitalization and death. Now we're facing long COVID syndrome. You heard probably one of the world's experts in this, Dr. Garza, just a few lectures ago. Multiple aspects to this illness. Estimates are early in the pandemic, 50% of hospitalized patients. Recent estimate, probably 7% of everybody who gets it. I've been impressed by this paper by Dexner and colleagues that basically 48,000 Germans that have concluded that probably 70% of long COVID is actually due to the vaccine. People are preloaded with this, and then they get COVID or vice versa. So I agree with the comments. Every patient needs a detailed history of when they took the vaccines and when they got COVID. And it's probably a blend. Almost everybody who has long COVID now took the vaccine, and you can't sort it out. Both contribute to the syndrome. Spikeopathy. This is a wonderful paper highlighting all the data about this spike protein. It's in the body. It's all over the body, the brain, the blood vessel cells. Now, importantly, this is really important. The spike protein from the infection and from the vaccine are very different. Remember, what we know in the human body from the natural infection is the S1 segment alone, and then from the vaccine, it's the S1 and S2 segment, and they trimerize. Remember, the spike protein is always shown as 3. It's not a single one. They trimerize. They actually make a trimer. The spike protein is the most disease-promoting protein we've ever seen in human medicine. It makes staphylococcal toxin look like nothing. It's physically in the blood clots. It's physically in the brain. It's physically causing inflammation. And all of us, thankfully, have been exposed to it. If you look at the publication studies, all of you have antibodies against spike protein if we actually have really detailed laboratory assays. This is what it looks like. One of the reasons why it always looks like a little 3-pronged bud is that it trimerizes. It trimerizes. Brogna and colleagues found vaccine spike protein in the bloodstream in at least half of people who took the shot out to 6 months. Then they take another shot and they have more spike protein. It's physically in the bloodstream, a protein that was engineered in a biosecurity lab in Wuhan, China, that's coded for by messenger RNA vaccines and adenoviral vaccines. It is a mind-blowing reality that this could be happening. People are walking around with spike protein in their bloodstream. Now, Invitrogen and one Japanese company have an assay, and soon we'll be able to measure it. Right now, we measure antibodies or other kind of indirect measures of the spike protein, but assume it's there in your patients who are taking the vaccine. Half of people have it in the bloodstream. A constructive proposed solution, Dr. Proctor and I have recently published, is do something about the spike protein. Do something about it. Preclinical data suggest nattokinase derived from the fermentation of soy. Many of you know about it, work with it. Bromelain, a family of enzymes found in the stems of pineapple, actually do degrade the spike protein in preclinical models, intact cell and cell lysate models. Curcumin has gotten all the way to randomized trials, reducing levels of inflammation, improving symptoms in people with long COVID. So 3 natural substances appear to play a role, and what we've published in this is a base spike protein detoxification. People said, wait a minute, I want to use nicotine. We said, fine, add it to that. Oh, I want to use N-acetylcysteine. Fine. I want to use silver. Fine, add it to it. But the base, the spike protein has to be addressed. We're 4 years into this. I've tried everything. I've looked at every study possible. Biden administration has delivered nothing. We are finding that this takes time, 3, 6, or 9 months or longer, but people are steadily getting better. And I've had a couple of patients walk in and say, thank the Lord, I'm back, including a family member. I've carefully observed this. So we don't have large prospective, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled trials. I checked clinicaltrials.gov. We're not going to have these trials. They don't exist. This is based on clinical judgment. These doses are low. We're way below the safety levels of these. They could be augmented. We have a paper suggesting maybe sureptase or lumbricase. Other things could play a role. But we know one thing with nattokinase and bromelain is they physically get in the bloodstream because we can see blood coagulation levels change. Bromelain prolongs the prothrombin time, and nattokinase increases the D-dimer, so we know it's fibrinolytic. Japanese just published a paper, it's on my Substack, where they have the first assay to measure nattokinase blood levels. So these actually have at least some pharmacokinetics we can get a handle on. This is a prothrombotic vaccine-induced illness, a medicinal approach that is proteolytic, that is antithrombotic, and that is anti-inflammatory makes a lot of sense. And that's our proposal. This is what we're doing in our office. And when I testify in Congress, I'm just going to hold this up, just like I held up the McCullough protocol, treatment protocol. I'm saying, listen, I'm doing this. I'm not asking for permission. I am doing this. Our federal government right now, our CDC, NIH, and FDA say for long COVID to do nothing, just like they said for COVID to do nothing. They have no proposals. They have no answers. People said, oh, Dr. McCullough, when I published this, I got crushing censorship on the internet and social media. It was the same thing over again. They said, Dr. McCullough, you can't do this. You and Dr. Proctor can't do this. I said, I'm not asking for permission. I'm doing it. This is the best scholarship and the best of science that exists. Now, how many of you have had COVID? How many of you have had COVID? Well, what we know is that if you've been through the Delta or Omicron outbreak, zero risk of hospitalization and death. This is the best study that exists from U.S. prison system, huge study. This is the new risk paradigm. The risk paradigm, if you've had well-documented COVID, you're at negligible risk. There's hardly anybody to worry about at this point in time. We manage this with nasal sprays and gargles. We don't even need to prescribe drugs. Almost all the doctors in our circles are the same. I want to move quickly into this new epidemic, autism and transgenderism. They're rising in parallel. This is another manifestation of the human mind being distorted in some way, and it's all over the world, and it's simultaneous, not just a U.S. problem. We know with autism, there are now 200 papers showing the origins of autism are somehow early in childhood due to immune system dysregulation. Not any single aluminum or mercury, what have you, it's due to immune system dysregulation. There are a bevy of papers and reports of a child who comes in and gets such an immune system blast with half a dozen to a dozen vaccines all at once, they develop a febrile seizure, and they are never the same. And they develop the neuropsychiatric manifestations of autism. It's real. It's real. Autism, when I was a kid, was 1 in 10,000. Now it's 1 in 36. In California, where vaccines are completely mandated, you can't get out of it to go to school, they have autism tracks in school, like science and math and honors. They have autism as a tract. Autism is the epidemic that we're facing. It's massive. Now, how is that related to what we're seeing today in terms of transgenderism? Well, DeLong, this is one of many papers, about 800 papers out there. It's not conclusive. I don't know the etiology of autism. I can tell you our government's doing nothing to investigate this. Nothing. Parents are besides themselves with autistic kids. How many of you have been touched by autism in your family circles? Yeah, it's about a third. It's a major problem. DeLong basically said, listen, it wasn't until we got vaccines in combination did we start to see this. Very important. Once they got to, the big combination that really tipped the scales on this was the 4 doses of DPT, 3 doses of polio, 1 dose of measles, 3 doses of Haemophilus influenza B, 3 doses of Hep B. Once we got there, it was like wildfire because it's all in combination. None of these products tested for safety or long-term risks. The ACIP panel, I think the final straw that broke the back of many families on this was the fact that they recommended the COVID vaccines to children down to 6 months. That's when reasonable parents said, wait a minute, that's enough. And now the World Council for Health is saying no vaccines, none. So if you're a family member, you're concerned about young children in your family, you want something to hang on to, here's an international organization. Dr. Tess Lowry, their leader, will be in Dallas next week. We're going on Daystar together and a bunch of appearances. They're saying, listen, stop right now. We don't have major threats of diphtheria or pertussis, and we can manage things. Stop right now. For the health of children, stop. They're safer right now to wait. What about transgenderism? Well, Vandermeesen reported 15 years ago that kids coming forward for transgender surgery were autistic. Now Warrior looks backwards of those who are transgender, and they have autism. What reasonable kid would want to change their gender? The answer is an autistic kid. That's the reality. That's the reason why we have a transgender crisis right now is because it took all these years to build up a big enough population with autistic traits. We're talking autism spectrum disorder, Asperger's, this entire spectrum. Now in sexual medicine, it's clear that there's pronounced increase in mental health care, adjustment, anxiety, mood, personality. The surgeries and the hormones make it worse. That's actually an indication to do this. It makes it worse. You know, every single medical school is behind this. Every single medical school in Texas was gearing up for this. I got a letter the other day from a division chief of transgender medicine from Harvard. They're all in. Every major society is supporting this. Transgender medicine increases mortality from homicide, suicide, and other causes. This was published in JAMA. It doesn't reduce mortality, it increases mortality. So the Attorney General's office in Texas reached out to me this summer and said, Dr. McCullough, we had a ban on transgender medicine, but now it's been overturned, it's been stayed, and we're coming down to the deadline. They said we can't find a single prominent doctor to write a report going against transgender medicine in the youth. And I said, you found him now. I dropped everything I did. I wrote a report, and it took that case all the way to Supreme Court. And since September 5th of 2023, transgender medicine in the youth is banned in this state. Don't let it happen again. Transgender medicine is bad medicine. We shouldn't have to ban it because no ethical doctor or nurse or technician would ever be involved in this. Talk to your colleagues. It's unethical, it's immoral, and now in this state it's illegal, thank goodness. Now you're here, and we're here because our medical freedom and our social freedom, our economic freedom has basically been put on the stake in this new era of the pandemic and beyond. Denise Sibley is the first one to go before the American Board of Internal Medicine she's been tried and convicted of spreading misinformation. And she just did her appeal in person. It's the first time she's actually faced the American Board of Internal Medicine face-to-face. And she had 13 binders, and she lectured them for 3.5 hours on vaccine safety. She's a hero. She worked with the Tennessee legislature to improve ivermectin access lawfully with a practitioner's license agreement for ivermectin. And Denise, who's an AOA graduate from University of Virginia, she's top of her class, top internist, not a blemish on her clinical record, could be the first person to lose her board certification based on political grounds. Misinformation is a propaganda term. It doesn't exist in medicine. Reject it. Don't get into this mudslinging, misinformation. It doesn't exist. I've never published a paper on misinformation. I never will. It's never been in a single textbook I've read. It won't be on a single board exam. Misinformation came into the medical, the lexicon in English language in 1500. It was used extensively in Nazi Germany by Goebbels under Hitler. It is a propaganda term. In 2018, the Washington Post, 2018, before COVID, it was word of the year because it became weaponized in partisan politics. Misinformation and disinformation are propaganda terms. Anybody slinging those words around is participating in propaganda. You know, Northwestern University, my former alma mater for residency, University of Washington, Stanford, they're having misinformation conferences. The American Board of Internal Medicine says on its website its number one priority is not heart disease, it's not cancer. It's actually to hunt down misinformation. Their number one priority is some form of distorted propaganda. So to finish and conclude, the pandemic response has been a global disaster. The safety profile of these vaccines is now well characterized. That is a regulatory term. The limitations of efficacy of these vaccines have evolved over time. As we sit here today, they have no efficacy that's clinically important. The pre-hospital phase is the therapeutic opportunity for COVID-19 and the next pandemic. Be ready to treat. Try to recruit as many people as you can to be ready to treat. The twin epidemics of autism and transgenderism are related. Those are the people who are making this terrible decision, is they have baseline psychiatric disease, neuropsychiatric disease. Censorship and reprisal are working to crush our free speech in some type of global process that we're still trying to understand. So what we've done today, and this has been a great conference to do this, is kind of weigh out the evidence. The fate of our country and the world is in the background. But what we need to do is we need to roar like a lion. Remember St. Augustine said, let the truth out. It's like a lion. It can defend itself. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. Be bold and be relentless, because it's up to us. A small number of people have eyes to see and ears to hear. Everyone else seems to be blind. It's up to us. It appears relatively obvious that very few people themselves are, coming to their own new revelation of what's going on. The task is ours. Let's drop all the vaccine mandates immediately. Prohibit all forms of pressure, coercion, threat of reprisal. Ban all forms of vaccine discrimination. Get these products off the market. Begin vaccine injury treatment centers. Pivot to early treatment as we need it. We need certainly long COVID treatment. Ban transgender programs all over. We've just got to fight this down. I think everybody can help by visit your doctor and ask your doctor, are you still supporting these vaccines, doctor? Are you on your 9th shot? And you can tell them, listen, I don't think they're safe. And if doctors heard that 30 patients a day that the vaccines weren't safe, I think it would sink in. So many doctors want to run for the hills. Or better yet, they say, oh, Dr. McCullough, can I see you? Or can I see Dr. Proctor? They want to run to us. Say, listen, you've got to go face the music with your doctors. Patients will change their doctors. I'm convinced of it. Right now, there's a complete shutdown. None of my academic colleagues will even respond to an email. I haven't had a single chief of medicine, chief of infectious disease, or dean of anybody at my standing face to face, look me in the eye, and even have a conversation. I walked into a major medical center every day for 2 years since the crisis, and people looked at the floor. They know that they're wrong. I testified 3 times in the U.S. Senate. We had seats for Fauci, Walensky, Jha, everybody. They refused to face me or anyone in my circles. This is about who's bigger and stronger. This is about you becoming bold and relentless and speaking out. The most effective people get into conversations every day and say, you know what? These vaccines aren't safe. It's really bothering me. I know a dentist who does that. She meets every person she meets. In the nicest way, she spreads the word. Do you know we're down to 1.3% of Americans taking a booster? The message is out. So let's have courage, and let's work together to end this pandemic. I'm Dr. Peter McCullough. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.